Hello and welcome to the part two with Abigail. And of course, we are going to have an excellent conversation today as well. So, hope to have you all on the open take once again. Welcome, Abigail.
Thank you so much for having me again. It is a pleasure, and I'm very happy to be part of this.
So, we are going to start with the next set today. And let's not keep the time rolling. And let me shoot my first question. The inherited monster. In 15 years of your experience, what is the most terrifying example you have seen of a parent unconsciously passing down a specific trauma to a child, creating a literal psychological mirror image?
I've seen one case comes to mind very strongly uh, of intergenerational trauma,
Okay.
which passes down from grandmother to mother to daughter. And now the amount of trauma that was there is now I can see she was a client is passing down to her own daughter because I know uh, the kind of situations, environments that have been created, especially because of her own trauma, that I'm sure the child is going to grow up and have challenges. So, yeah, it just crushes my heart when I see that because uh, when will we stop, right? So, see, sexual abuse, which is family, right? Which is within family, but then also BPD traits which I've seen, transfer from grandmother to mother to daughter. Could be because of an abusive partner, could be because of very difficult situations, and just seeing her own mother being abused to the point of death. Like so many times, like the mother would bleed, like almost like she would die. And she'd seen all of that. So it is not an easy thing for a child to witness. And then a lot of abandonment issues. But one could see that this is a very, when I looked into the entire case history and I looked into, uh, you know, the significant trauma, right? And I was like, when will this stop? Something has to. It was a very, very heartbreaking case. Yeah.
I'm asking that the kind of generational trauma that is passing on from a grandmother to a mother to a child. Does this have anything to do with their DNA? I mean, a mind cannot be passed from generation, right? So is it like a bloodline disorder that passes down? I'm just asking, it's a casual
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. Well, there is, we can say that there are some gene expression, but again, it is not something that we can, it's not evidently we can say that there are not clear evidence for it, and we have to look at the science behind it. But
Mhm.
I'm basing it on a lot of nurture instead of just nature. Nature might have little to do with it, but the nurture, the environment that the child has been brought up in, the kind of stress that the child saw, the kind of stress that the mother experienced. Another case comes to my mind is when a child experiences um, significant, I think we discussed this last time, if a son, sees, his mother get abused, it becomes a part of an expression of anger for him. Okay, this can be done. When I'm really angry, I also can do that because it becomes something that they are mirroring. Right? I think we discussed this last time.
So do you think that those are actually trying doing that kind of an assault? They are also victims of some kind of trauma because rehabs are there for them also. Or maybe punishment where they are not acknowledging what I have done, I have done. I'm happy about it. And that's really gruesome. So are they also victims to any kind of trauma or anything that they have that feeling that I need to do that?
Yeah. And I think you're talking about the Epstein files, right? Uh,
Epstein files, and there was another site which came up recently where men are actually trained how to abuse their better halves or maybe exchange their
Yes,
better halves. And that
yes.
was a very tragic kind of a situation, even to accept that this actually happened. But the people who are not into this, I think they also felt very traumatized, I should say, that why is this happening? And we are clean, so why should we be coming into this? So how
Yeah.
should we do that?
Thank you for bringing this point up because we tend to not look at the predator. We just, make them into as rapists or abusers, assaulters, and we don't look into their psyche,
Yeah.
right? And because I have myself experienced abuse, sexual uh, sexual abuse, especially at an early age, since early age. And I have noticed one thing is that the individual is trying to seek control, right? And more often than not, an individual who has been highly traumatized, be it as a child, be it as a teenager, or even as an adult, especially and more often than not, it is as a teenager and as a child. When an individual is abused, it can be physical abuse. It might not always be sexual abuse. It could be humiliation. It could be, just, you know, it could be at the hands of their parents or their siblings or their cousins. And that leads into that, that significant, that trauma that makes them want to do something. Because when there is no healing, right, how do you overcome? How do you overcome your pain? Right? So, I mean, I always tell this to my clients is there are like two ways to elevate yourself, right? One is when you work on yourself. I mean, of course, we're looking at even corporate world or any world where we want to elevate ourselves,
Exactly.
grow, become better, right? Either we elevate ourselves, work on ourselves and keep on pushing our boundaries and learning new tools,
Mm.
or we can push the other person down. But I want to just talk about when we see crying or when we see emotional distress being expressed in a certain manner, as children, we adapt to that, right? So if
Yeah.
a parent goes silent or gives you silent treatment, you also will start giving silent treatment to your partner or your own children because you feel you've learned that as a behavior of expression of disapproval, expression of anger, right? Similarly, if you have seen your parent, this is a case that comes to my mind, that the mother would violently beat herself when she would get very stressed out, pull out her hair, scream, slap herself, and and some of that, some of those aspects, because it's very terrorizing also for a child. The mother is not beating the child, but the mother might be beating herself so
Yeah.
much that it is very disturbing also. But that also becomes a learned behavior. And one of my clients, I that was her way of expression of, any kind of distress, any kind of emotional distress. So yeah, that things like that also can play because you're seeing it. It doesn't necessarily have to do anything with nature. Just nurture and how are you exposed to emotional dysregulation and management of one's own emotions.
So it's like learning up what you actually see and treating yourself in a certain way in a certain situation. That's basically what the child is taking up from the family or the condition.
Yes, 100%, 100%. Child mirrors a lot. And I think we as individuals also, oh, this is like my mother. Oh, I'm doing this
Yeah,
like my
yeah,
father.
very
Some
familiarity.
things that we don't want, we might do, in times when we are uh, very hard pressed, right? So I think all of us have had those moments. They're like, "Array," I think a lot of memes and a lot of reels also have been made about it, recently that, oh, I'm turning into my mother or I'm turning into my father and I bijli bacha rahe hai or, things like that,
Mhm.
where you're like, oh, put on put off the AC or why is the fan on? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
somehow we're like, what happened to us? When did we become our parents, right? So I think those things are very common. It is, of course, we are discussing this in a more lighter note, but even in the more uh, incidents when we don't want to do something that we did, like I've had clients, who told that, I never wanted to be like my father or my mother who used
Yeah.
to, hit me. But I'm so sad that I am becoming that because you have not understood you never learned how to manage your emotions. All you have said is, I will not do like this. But how will you manage your emotions, or how will you, uh, punish your children? Because children need punishment, children need repercussions. Now, what would those be? How would you train a child? Now, that
Yes.
you never thought of. You just said, I will not do this. But you never trained yourself, you never developed yourself. In an absence of anything, there will not be any vacuum. So in an absence, it will be filled with something you've seen, something you've learned, and so it's very important, right, to also introspect. That's something that is very much available in therapy, right? We have a lot of stigma around therapy, but Priyadarshini, I think you be someone who'd also acknowledge that therapy has, being a psychologist yourself, that
Yes.
therapy is something where we're also exploring a lot of things. Doesn't have to mean that you have a mental illness or you have,
Exactly.
you are crazy, or
Not
we
at all.
have to understand that therapy gives us a space for introspection. It gives us a space to dwell deeper. Now, I'm not saying only therapy can make you introspect, but therapy makes it easier because you have someone guiding you, supporting you through that process, giving you a safe space. Sometimes it might be difficult to do that with a parent, with a sibling, with a friend, with a spouse, because there's a lot of other emotions that kind of, uh, something like, oh, because you said you used to give me silent treatment, that I have internalized a lot of shame. Now you tell that to your parent, there will be a lot of defensiveness. No, I knew that is the best, and I had to do. Oh, I don't even know about this. It could be just downright denial, right? So it's always individually also one can do. I don't know, of course, but there is a need to introspect our ways, what we do, why we do, right? It's really, really, uh, I feel it's very paramount to our development as an individual, right? Otherwise, we can always, like, keep call some men, man child. I think the same equivalent has to be for women and every human being. If we do not, you know, unlearn certain, unhealthy patterns and even identify that they're unhealthy, right? So that introspection is very much needed.
Very true. Thank you for the beautiful explanation. I mean, a tough situation. Many have been fall. I mean, many might have fallen in this kind of a situation, but of course, there's a way to come out. And yes, of course, therapy gives us a space. Even when we do it on ourselves or on others, it's a huge space that we get. Very true. So, coming to my next question, comfort and cures. Why do survivors of severe trauma actively, almost magnetically, seek out destructive environments or toxic partners? Or why does that peace feel like a threat to a traumatized brain? I mean, very
Thank
often,
you for asking that question. Thank you so much for asking that question because it is such an amazing way our mind, our interpersonal neurobiology is trained,
yeah,
right? Uh, I'm just so glad you asked this question because so many times we we look at an abuse survivor and we're like, इसको तो आदत ही है मार खाने की, उसको अच्छा लगता है. I've seen people say that. You know, there was one and relative, um, she was, you know, uh, she was in an abusive marriage. She left that marriage and she joined, she went, I think, she did not get married, but she was in some kind of a relationship or something. Again, that was abusive. So I heard, I heard her own family say that. इसको तो आदत हो गई है मार खाने की, and I'm like, it's very interesting because it's very easy to judge. Firstly, it is, and Indians, we love judging.
हाँ.
We are very, very good at it.
तो अभी
We are
वो
good at,
दुनिया में हम जज करेंगे.
yeah, I mean, we can do that for anything.
Yeah.
I'm a very, very famous song. ना कुछ तो लोग कहेंगे, लोगों का
Oh
काम तो
my
कहना.
God.
Because I think we have just imbibed it. Anybody does anything, we first have a judgment before understanding anything. But yeah, I did something that hit a nerve, so it hit a chord, sorry. And I was just like wondering, I wanted to share that. But interpersonal neurobiology is a key to understanding, why certain destructive patterns continue, right? So let me give you a very a insight that I give to a lot of my clients. Okay. So chaos feels familiar. Okay. You have been brought up in chaos. You have experienced a lot of silent treatment. You have experienced physical abuse. You have experienced love bombing, right? Love bombing is a term when a narcissist abuses, and
Oh.
when you kind of, not respond back or try to,
Hmm.
pull back, there's a lot of love bombing, you know. And so you start correlating the love bombing with the abuse. Okay. Um, so let me just give another insight. So one very interesting incident comes to my mind, Priyadarshini, where I read in a book. I mean, Sudhir Kakkar's book is a very famous Indian psychoanalyst. He's no more, but his book, Intimate Relationships, he was talking about how in an abusive marriage, where abuse, physical abuse, or always precedes any physical act of intimacy, that then the wife, when wanting any sort of intimacy, any sort of closeness, or wanting sexual intercourse, would try to start up a fight just so she can have sex. So that is it was such like a light bulb moment for me. I was like, when trauma and love get very closely knit together, you start expecting the other if something, if the other happens. Like, you start expecting the other if one precedes it, right? If there is a connection. Is if after, as a child, if you were beaten up a lot, but afterwards your father or your mother would treat you very well, buy you some chocolates, you will start associating the same, right? It is classical conditioning,
Hmm.
which we've learned, as children also
Yeah.
in our psychology textbooks. We talk about, Pavlov or Skinner's experiments. But it is a little bit more than that, because that is how your interpersonal neurobiology was shaped. Now I'm keeping on talking about interpersonal neurobiology because it is very poignant in understanding relationships. If I have understood love to be, if or somebody who loves me, abuses me, then loves me, abuses me, then loves me, abuses me, then loves me, slaps me, then kisses me, or shouts at me really badly, and then the next day, next time, next moment, act like nothing happened, right? Or gives me the silent treatment for something I don't even know what happened. So there's so much of chaos. Our nervous system is always in a survival mode, be it fight, flight, freeze, or submit. Five modes, which are very common in the limbic-driven system, where we are. I'm using a lot of technical jargon, but it's important to understand how our neurobiology is shaped by trauma. Trauma shapes it. Trauma shapes it, right? And
Yeah.
so it becomes very important for us to understand that chaos means that is how you learn to live. And because that's how you've learned to live, it takes you a long time to pick up on the red flags, right? Because you've seen this, you don't seem
The
till
normal
the
life.
abuse becomes. Yeah, till the abuse becomes so much that you then realize, oh, this is actually abusive. Because before, the traits you felt, oh, this seems okay. Oh, this
Hmm.
seems okay. You're not able to pick up on them because you understand relationships like that, traumatic, chaotic. So it almost seems like they thrive on trauma or they thrive on chaos, and comfort or silence becomes scary. Now, in here, I want to also talk a little bit about myself because I've grown up in a lot of trauma and I've seen a lot. And I did mention that last, but in that moment, you become so addicted, or not addicted, but you learn to thrive in chaos. Only when someone shouts, you're like, oh, okay, I need to do something, but you cannot do it in silence. Or when, so your neural pathways are trained like that. If somebody shouts, you will do it. If there is no shouting, if there is no screaming, if there is a lot of peace, because there is peace, you just feel, oh, you can just exist. You don't know how to handle peace. You don't know how to handle moments of silence. You don't know how to handle when nobody's shouting at you.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah.
know that. You are
Mm-hmm.
trained to thrive on chaos. So
This
your
is very,
system gets activated. Okay, now let me, if
yeah,
somebody's like, oh, why are you not studying? And if always shouted at to study, then there is nobody shouting, you will not study. And
exactly.
so
I think the brain is trained to be treated with chaos, and then you are being treated with so much of silence and empathy that you are agitated, like, what is happening? And that is like,
exactly.
it reverts back more that have I done so gruesome that no one is talking also? I think
Yeah.
that's a very relatable point, of course.
And it's like parents then justify कि you डांटेंगे नहीं ना तो कुछ करेगा ही नहीं.
Ah,
But you train him to do something when you're shouting at him, or you trained her to do something when you're shouting at her. So
very true.
moments of silence feel like a threat, or
Yes,
feel like, oh, somebody is observing me, you know, or you might just you know, always live walk on eggshells. When something happens, you're like, okay, you get into the act,
yes,
your activity,
yes.
you
Very
are like, okay, let me do what I have to do,
yes,
kind of just
exactly.
get jolts you into action. Uh, and at the same time, when relationships are healthy, or your other spouse or your partner is healthy, you don't know how to accept that healthy love. So for the longest time, I was not able to receive my husband's love because I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was
Yeah.
always waiting for the negative or the anger, or I
Mhm.
was always waiting, oh, this is not happening. So I was not able to understand. But it took me a long time, and I have been married, and this December will be 13 years of being married. So I can share my personal experience also, because if one is trained to thrive on chaos, when comfort and healthy environment feels like a threat or feels very unfamiliar, you just don't know what to do, and that anxiety that there is there generally in other relationships that we experienced, be it at home, be it since childhood, be it through abuse, that you don't know what to expect in comfort. What does comfort mean? What does it mean for me? How do I, where is my place here? If you've only existed in chaotic relationships, uh, you don't know what your place is. And you do not know to receive love also. Because when love is transactional, just being loved for who you are, you're like, okay, what is happening?
Yeah.
It's very confusing. So yeah, so that's something that I just wanted to talk about, because you talked about that, and I thought that was it took it. I needed to kind of explore it step by
Yes.
step, because yes, we do say that uh, uh, people are addicted to chaos. Yeah, because they are trained to be. They're trained to only survive on chaos. They're not addicted to it.
That was
They
very
don't live
relatable, I
in it.
think. Yeah. I mean, experienced situations, even my clients have been through. This is a very, I mean, present day also, the scenario. Someone has been treated with a certain way, and now after committing a mistake or maybe a situation, they are being treated in a different way. The person's mind is like, what is happening? That was right, or this is right? Where am I existing? Like a coexistential situation.
Yeah.
Very true. Thanks a lot for that explanation. I mean, would be a very significant part of the discussion. Okay. Coming to the
Thank you.
next, coming to the next one. Toxicity of toxic positive is the modern wellness and self-love movement. People are like self-love, kind of do the physical desires also with yourself just to stay calm and not disturb others without any disregard or, I mean, what should I say, any disrespect to any practitioner. Um, actually make is it making people weaker, or are we pathologizing a normal human suffering and turning people into perpetual victims? This question is without any hurt to any practitioner, please. I'm giving a disclaimer on the video itself.
So self-love is very important. Okay.
Hmm.
We have to love ourselves in order to just, you know, go through life, right? Otherwise, if we do not, we let others walk all over us, right? Self-love is very important. But like you said, everything, and sometimes anything can become toxic. Right? It's like, I'm a good mother, so I just want to say yes to my child. My child says, I don't want to brush my teeth. I'm like, okay, beta. My child said, I don't want to go to school. Okay, beta. My child says, I only want to eat sweets. I'm such a good mother. I'm only saying yes. Everybody will say,
Okay.
oh, wow, she's a horrible mother. Right.
Yes. So, I
Right.
mean, end of the end of the discussion completely, especially Indian society. Yeah, mommy, she's allowing everything. Like that. These are the
No, but
kind of
in other
con.
societies also, any society, I wanted to speak from a very universal perspective. If a mother allows a child to eat sugar from morning to evening, the child is not eating any other nutrition, just only and will only drink, sugar like substitutes or chocolates all day, right? What would anyone say? Forget somebody saying in Finland also.
Hmm.
Someone saying in Latin America also. I'm just using a very universal uh, example. What would you tell that mother? You will not say she's a healthy or a good mother,
Hmm.
right? So there is, uh, when I remember one of my very early, when I was very young, I was in my 11th standard and I was learning political science. And we didn't understand democracy and where, how it how it works. And so what our teacher said that, only with rules, only with boundaries can you truly enjoy freedom, right? So if there are no rules, how will we know if who has won, who has lost? If you talk about a cricket match or a football match, right? So I feel self-love is very important, but it has to be in it cannot be to a place where you are just isolating yourself from everyone else, or you are saying, no, not, nobody else's opinion matters, but mine. I think I'm the best. I think that also needs a lot of checks and balances is very important because we are not isolated. We are not living in isolation. We are not, no man is an island,
Hmm.
right? The famous John Donne's, words he wrote, no man is an island entire of itself. So we have to also see ourselves in conjunction to others. We have to also see ourselves in how people perceive us. Are we having unhealthy traits? Right? So where does my freedom end? A very, very famous thing, that one of my professors uh, that I was studying in my undergraduate said that, your freedom ends at my nose. So you can bring your hand close to my nose, your punch, but it ends at my nose before it hits me, right? So we are also living in a society. We're not isolated beings. We're not polar bears who are just, living on our own. We exist in society, and our nature has to be understood through that. And we have to also take into cognizance what others tell us. Now, of course, that if you see this as if you see this outside of context, you might see, oh, she's saying that, oh, everybody's opinion I have to take into cognizance and I have to listen to everyone. That is the opposite spectrum where we listen and do things for everybody else. What will others say? I'm not talking about that. I'm saying you have to evaluate yourself in conjunction to your relationships. and your place in society. So self-love has to come as an individual also. Now, if you look at, if you want to talk about Maslow's, pyramid, of different hierarchies, we also see that an individual is not just, you know, yourself. You have to find your place in society, your sense of belonging, your spirituality, what you think is the how are you contributing to society? How do you feel fulfilled?
Hmm.
And there's only so much of self gratification and masturbation and addiction and just all kinds of it could be travel, it could be shopping, it could be all kinds of I'm not saying addictions because there are ways to recreational drugs, if not addictive drugs like marijuana. There's only so much of that, or mushrooms, or there's only so much of that you can do to fully truly actualize yourself or fulfill yourself. At one point, you will want to know what is happening,
True.
right? There is only so much of uh, you know uh, pleasure, because there will come a time when the pleasure will become pain, right?
True.
And yeah, so yeah, that is what I'm wanting to talk, because it's talked about, self-love, yes. But there will come a time when that pleasure will become painful, where, trying to find freedom, trying to find
Hmm.
excitement, there is no other excitement left. And it just gets worse. And so you need worse and worse things. Like, the law of diminishing returns, right? If this gave me pleasure, now I need much more of this or much more extreme. As we've seen, um, when we see pornography addiction, you go from very vanilla stages to extreme, really horrific, aspects, be it child pornography, be it, you know, it is just, there is no end to it. There will come a time that that pleasure itself will become your prison, right? So yeah, I think
Okay. Now, coming to the next one, the false memory. How fragile is our memory of pain? I mean, this is a very upcoming question in these days. Is it
yeah,
possible for someone to completely manufacture a traumatic past event, or conversely live through a horrific reality and genuinely convince themselves it never happened?
both are very possible, and both are very possible. So in a case where you might create a memory of something which you have convinced yourself that it has happened, right? And it actually hasn't. It is very possible. It is very much possible. But it tells us a lot more. The mind is protecting a worse reality. It could be. Or it could be that something else is happening. So, say a child is living in a very traumatic, narcissistic parental care, is neglected, is abused. Like, if you've seen the movie The Glass Castle or have read the book, you would understand that neglect, the absolute abject neglect that parents would not provide for the children for days. For days, they would not have food to eat. Now, that is abuse, that is trauma, right? And but maybe the child's mind could not come to accept that the parent who was supposed to love them and care for them were abusive, that they could have created a narrative of abuse which did not involve their parents. So it could be some man came and sexually abused me, or I was raped, even though the abuse that they actually faced might not be sexual in nature. But it is the mind trying to, you know, um, create a narrative where they're able to find catharsis or live through the real pain that they experienced, but they were just not able to come to terms with it. So it's something known as psychological immunity. Your brain protects you from what has really happened, You cannot accept it. So it creates a false memory. Just to, it is like a placeholder for the real trauma that you experience, but it is just too traumatic for you to accept. So I gave an example of a glass castle just to explain that it might not always be sexual in nature, the trauma that you experience, but the memory that you created could be sexual in nature. Or it could be the opposite also. The memory or the trauma was so abusive, so sexual in nature, that you could have translated that into something that you could palatable, much more. So it is easier to maybe, still using the glass castle narrative, it is easier to accept that a stranger came and raped me than my own parents not feeding me, right? So it is like a protection that our mind creates. So sometimes false memories are there, and but that always means that there is abuse. That abuse was there, but of what nature, or of, was this exactly what happened? Maybe not. But it is there because the real abuse might not be very palatable, might not be something that the mind is able to accept. And the other case where you forget. Again, it is psychological immunity, where your mind just not ready to accept what you experienced. And so yeah, you can have it both ways. It just depends. Uh, there are memories that people have just forgotten just to protect themselves. And yeah, so it is just like how you choose to react. It could be that you're very creative, you're very imaginative, and so you could create a false memory. Or, to be very honest, one doesn't know how one will respond. How one individual responds from the other is very different, right? Like
Right.
if I tell someone, oh, you're good for nothing, you can't do anything. The other one person might take it as a challenge. I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to show you. Another might just accept it. Oh yeah, okay, I'm good for nothing.
Like
You
every
in
lock
both
has a
cases,
different key.
yeah. So in one case, you how you choose to respond is, there are no right or wrong ways to respond, right? Especially to trauma. You did the best that you could. You did the best that you could, and survived, right?
That's the point. Survival is the point, actually, because we all are somewhere or the other just in the ocean of life, surviving through the storms, waves, everything, every situation.
Yeah.
Sometimes
I
we
just
get
want to say
very
that,
tight also.
yeah, but I just want to say that both can exist, but
Yeah.
both come from a place of trauma. It they might really come from a place of trauma. And it's not like, oh, somebody is just trying to gain sympathy. They created a false narrative. It
Mhm.
could be a placeholder for something that they were not able to accept.
Very
Right?
true.
And
Next,
it's all happening at a subconscious level. So it's not that they're very aware of it, that they are creating it. No, it's happening at a subconscious level, at a level that is not very consciously available to them.
that's a very, very interesting, creating a different set of, another brain just for a protection shield and then facing the world. Yeah, brain is like the
Human beings
best.
are amazing by the way. Human beings and our capacity for survival is amazing.
Coming to my next one. This is the second last of the show. So please hold your hearts, maybe. The predator instinct. Do predators and abusers instinctively smell trauma on a person? What are the subtle subconscious signals a traumatized person gives off that makes them a target over and over again? Repetitive traumas coming to the same person. This is like, it happens. So why and
Yeah, it
how?
happens. And you would see, if you look at data, right, data suggests that individuals who are abused as children go on to face secondary abuse as adults, sexual abuse, sexual harassment. They are twice as likely to face it than individuals who've never been abused. And like you said, can predators smell trauma. And it's very interesting because, yes, they can. And they can because probably you never learned to defend yourself. As a child, when you were abused by an elder person, you never knew how to hold on to your boundaries. You never learned to stand up for yourself. And so predators can see that when someone comes too close to you in a
Yeah, yeah.
workplace and you don't know how to respond. You don't say go behind or you don't go back
Mhm.
or you just go numb or you freeze. They know that okay, this person's boundaries this person hasn't understood to protect themselves or protect their boundaries and have we've never learned that because as a child you had no boundaries. Everybody came and kept violating you as if you have been a survivor of child sexual abuse or narcissistic parenting, even that, where the space I know of some clients who as adults also have no right, like the parent is like you cannot close the door and sit. The parent is not giving them working. The individuals are working, having a job, but then they have been taken away their private room privileges, whatever. So that narcissistic tendency that parents have and exert over the child has never learned to understand what their boundaries are, that they need to stand up for themselves. So in both cases, it could be sexual abuse, it could be physical abuse, and it could be narcissistic parental abuse also. So in all these cases, that you might communicate to others as an adult that you might have difficulty making decisions. You might not be very decisive. You might struggle communicating, standing up for yourself, and you might not have very strong or a sense of boundary where you do not know that, oh, people can't come and just breach your boundary. You might not breach anybody else's boundary. We are very careful about
Yeah,
that
yeah.
because we're taught that as a child that you cannot breach their
Other
boundary,
places.
right? But you have learned that anybody can come and just take what
Invade
they
our
want.
territory.
Yeah. So these are some things that a predator can smell, and that is why someone who survived abuse as a child is twice as likely to face abuse again. And I've seen that in my own cases, where individuals who were sexually abused go on to be raped, go on to be experiencing severe sexual harassment. And in so many of my cases, I've seen that, and even data proves that. So yeah.
I think
It is something that yes, you say they can
self-regulation.
smell trauma, but because they can smell, they're very astute observers,
Mm-hmm.
predators, very intelligent. They're very
Very,
astute
that's
observers.
a correct
They
word.
are noticing everything. So
Mm-hmm.
even in the case I think we discussed last time that how abusers pick children who they'll
Yeah,
abuse.
yeah.
I think
Yeah,
we
we had
discussed
that.
that
Yes.
extensively. They will look at people who are single parent
Yes,
children,
yes.
whose parents are not at home,
Mm-hmm.
and those who they cannot go and complain to. So something similar happens in adulthood also, uh, where certain aspects of your behavior are very minutely observed. Yeah.
So the final question, the final, should I say, final take eventually. What is the most unsettling truth about human nature that you have learned after 15 years of experience looking at the rawest parts of human soul?
That we're horrible as human beings. We are horrible. We can be
Hopeless.
extremely violent. And that is a case, that is something so real that an abuse survivor will actually go on and abuse. And it's a very common case. A bahu who has not had any agency ever will become an even worse mother-in-law because she's like, now finally I have agency. Someone,
Authority.
yes, right? So as individuals, we're inherently horrible. I used to believe that we're inherently good, but I have come to the understanding that no, we really are not. If given an opportunity, we will abuse, we will uh, hurt, try to find power, trying to yeah. So what I really began my journey believing that human beings are inherently good. But I have worked with the entire spectrum, be it rich, be it poor, be it the poorest, be it the most marginalized. I used to work in the space of community mental health as well. So I've worked at rural areas also. And I've seen that abuse is going to happen. It is going to be a cycle. Oppression is going to be a cycle. Discrimination is going to be a cycle till you decide to stop. Till you decide that I need to be different, that I need to, till you find it in your own heart. And I feel spirituality and your belief in God and your understanding that your actions have repercussions, right? That what you do here will have an impact on eternity,
That
right?
realization needs to come in.
Yes,
People actually.
and I feel even if that is not your, even if spirituality is not your way forward, even
Hmm.
if there are people who do not believe in any God, but they believe that humanity has to be valued. Now, I'm I'm digressing here, but I feel that individuals have to understand, have to have a spiritual, have to have a something just more transcendental, something beyond the here and the now. And I think that is what separates us from animals,
Yeah.
right? And so many times I've seen humans just stoop to levels of animal cruelty, like the cruelty which is even because if you see an animal, an animal is only hunting a live animal, not a sick animal. If you see, even animals have
Yeah, yeah, very
protocols.
true. Hmm.
They will not go after the only that they become old, right? Only when they cannot hunt. But if you see, they will not go after dead meat. They will always go after something which is healthy. Someone,
Healthy.
yeah.
Like,
We
come
as
on,
animals,
fish
we
are
as
really.
human beings are even worse than animals, I feel. We will go after the weak, who
Yeah.
cannot defend, the defenseless,
एक
those who can, the voiceless, those who cannot speak up for themselves.
एक शायद
I
कहावत है कि bears don't feed on the dead. There is a saying, I think, like the childhood stories which we used to, Aesop stories, I think. There was a line, bears never feed on the dead. Like they
yes,
smell literally and move away. If there's something fresh, they'll jump. That's
yeah. Yeah, and I think we're in that way, like I feel as human beings are even worse than animals,
we
right?
feel inferior from within, I think. We do not have the confidence to live. But I mean, critical management to self management is what we need to work. And of course, psychologists like you are there, many more are there, and we are really, I'm not including myself at the moment on the other part of
Exactly.
the
Yes.
I'm on the other part of the show right now. So, yes, thanks to you and a set of psychologists who have been, I mean, literally making themselves vulnerable to thousands, millions more emotions every day, each day, and doing a brilliant job. I think you really deserve a clap for that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a
So,
lot,
thank you
Abigail.
for having
It's
me.
been an excellent conversation throughout the two episodes. Of course, there are lakhs and lakhs of more questions still pending on human psychology,
Yes.
trauma, behavior, everything, because this is a never ending subject. So we'll come back, we'll bring you back, and thank you
I'll
once
be
again.
happy to do that. Thank you so much, Priyadarshini. And thank you for all the effort that you're putting in. I can really see, even the way you're curating the questions, keeping in mind your viewers, and curating an experience. And I'm very happy to have been participating in this. Yeah. Thank you so
Really
much
deep.
for having me.
Thanks a lot, Abigail. So, audience, see you again. And please, 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 if you like, if you really feel that this was good enough, a conversation, I'm not saying like, share, subscribe. Of course, subscribe to as a podcaster, I will want you. But please share with people who really needs this. This is all for you.